As you go through the South, you are going to get the feel that we are different.
Welcome to Charleston.
This is what used to be done on the plantations years ago.
KGB, the killer green bean.
The thing about Midnight and Savannah is that you can tell in the book how absolutely beautiful the city is.
Railroad travel is so great because it feels old-time.
The countryside is just so glorious, and it's not from a highway, but you're right in the middle of it.
Our southern rail adventure begins along the Mississippi River Delta in New Orleans, Louisiana. Famous for Mardi Gras, music, and food, the Big Easy is an ideal place to spend a day before boarding the train. The French Quarter is its best-known tourist attraction. But a few blocks away, the French Market provides a unique New Orleans culinary experience.
I was wondering if I could possibly sample some of the smoked alligator on a stick.
Yes, you may.
Every day, locals, tourists, and chefs like Anthony Hubbard mingle in the aisles of the French Market in search of distinctive New Orleans ingredients.
Any chef you ask would love to come to New Orleans. You have Creole food, you have Cajun food. Both are very old and still very contemporary. And this is the hotbed of that type of food.
There it is, I know.
Woo! As executive chef of the American Orient Express, Anthony is here to buy the food for the train trip ahead. His staff will prepare virtually all of the meals over the next week.
On the American Orient Express, we consider our food and our service 5-star. And a part of that is getting the best possible quality to our passengers. And what that means for me is going out and finding the freshest and best ingredients that whatever area I'm in has to offer. And here in New Orleans, the French Market is the place for those ingredients. I think I'd like to buy 15 of these. If you come here in the morning, you get the freshest fish from the morning. You are going to make a beautiful dinner. You get all the best vegetables, and you get the personal attention of the people who are selling them to you. I wanted to get 6 of these.
6 baskets?
Yeah. And I'll take all of these pairs. We are going on a 7-day trip from here in New Orleans to Washington, D.C. We have 85 passengers who are going to be eating a lot of food. So I'm looking to re-up on some of the things that I've run out of, some of the special ingredients that I can only find here in New Orleans. These are delicious, and passengers always go for them. So I'm going to grab a couple different flavors. I wanted a bunch of the Louisiana Bailey. This is good stuff. New Orleans is a wonderful food town. It's a great city, an old city, very classic. It's a lot of fun.
All right,
thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Yeah, I enjoy coming here every single time.
Our trip through the Old South is on board the American Orient Express, a private luxury train that offers rail excursions throughout the country. These rail cars have been restored to the elegance of the streamliner era of American railroading. The crew puts the final touches on the train as passengers arrive for an early evening reception and dinner on board.
Brad and Ray, Lamazi.
All right, you're in cabin E. Come up here and I'll show you to your cabin.
For many, this is their first trip through the American South, and the anticipation of what lies ahead is relieved only by departure. The train leaves New Orleans, heading east in the early morning hours. This is a 7-day trip of nearly 1,400 miles. We pass through 8 states, with stops at some of the South's major cities, including Savannah, Charleston, and Richmond. Our final destination is the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. The first leg of the trip is a short journey from New Orleans to the port city of Mobile, Alabama. We cross into Mississippi and follow the beautiful Gulf Coast for many miles. This is an area of grassy lowlands and large freshwater lakes. It's not unusual to spot an alligator along this section of the route. As the train passes through towns like Bay St. Louis, Gulfport, and Biloxi, passengers have time to get to know the train and settle into the rhythm of the rails. Sections of this route can be traveled aboard Amtrak trains, such as the Sunset Limited, Silver Meteor, and Carolinian. And Amtrak locomotives pull the American Orient Express. On this journey, the train itself is part of the experience. Surrounded by elegance, this is a chance to relive America's golden age of rail travel. Henry Hillman, Jr. is the president and CEO of the American Orient Express Railway Company.
We stop for a full day some places and let you experience both the trip of getting there, the journey of getting there, and the different places we go. These cars were built in the 40s and 50s, but this would be a little more reminiscent of the era of the private corporate sets and cars that the railroads and people like Rockefellers had and Carnegie's. This is a little more luxuriously appointed. It goes back almost to the 20s of the style of the interior of the cars. I think every trip is unique traveling by train. You get very close to the things you're passing. You can smell them, you can feel them. You stop at a crossing or for a train to go by, another train to go by, and you sit and you feel the desert or the bayou or the swamps.
The train takes us through seldom-seen stretches of the Gulf Coast, a place where land and water merge.
The spring has been a little slow to come in. I think it's because we had a dry winter comparatively.
Nick Spitzer is a folklorist and host of public radio's American Roots.
And railroad travel is so great because it feels old time. These beautiful old trains just give you a sense of that time past, but they're very present too. I mean, you're moving at a wonderfully mellow pace across the landscape. You don't have to have your hands on the wheel. You still see things from the trains that you don't see in the more groomed highway driving. It's especially true here because they built up a grade through what is essentially what we call a floating marsh. You see the backs of yards, you see shotgun houses and log cabins, junkyards and fishing camps, little dance halls and honky-tonks, the crossroads of towns. You see coastal marshes, tidal marshes, bayous, canals, and even the open Gulf on occasion. It's a kind of a liquid land environment. I think a lot of Americans, when they think of the United States, you say, well, how many coasts are there in America? Well, they say there's two. There's the East Coast and there's the West Coast. They forget that there's a South Coast, a third coast, I like to call it, the Gulf Coast. And I like to say that it's south of the South. It's deeper than the Deep South. It's more connected to the Caribbean in a lot of ways culturally. It's got French and Spanish, African, Caribbean, Native American, all mixing together. Physically, it's different too because it's very lowland. It is the riverine lowland of the Mississippi Valley coming to the Gulf of Mexico. So between New Orleans and Mobile, you're really cruising the Gulf Coast.
Mobile, Alabama is one of the oldest cities in the South. Founded by the French in 1702, Mobile is a busy port city of gleaming skyscrapers and Southern traditions.
Have a great day.
We are welcomed to Mobile by the Azalea Trail Maids. Each year, 50 of the city's outstanding high school seniors are chosen and trained to serve as ambassadors of goodwill to Mobile's growing number of visitors.
Mobile, some years ago, was referred to as America's best kept secret, but that is no longer the case.
Velma Kroom has lived in Mobile all her life.
It's a unique city. It is extremely southern, has the most wonderful, hospitable, friendly people in the world. And it is a wonderful place not only for adults to visit, but to bring their families as well. It's different in that we appear to be laid back, but don't let that fool you. We're really with it every minute. As visitors come into Mobile, Fort Condé would be a wonderful place to start your tour. It is a replica of the original French fort built in 1704. This tiny frontier settlement was the first capital of the French Empire in the New World and the port of entry of the entire Louisiana Territory. You do not want to miss seeing the battleship Alabama and the submarine Drum moored at Battleship Park, a short distance from the fort. The ship is extremely important because it served and saw duty in every major battle of the Pacific during World War II.
Mobile has preserved much of its past. There are over 4,000 buildings on the National Register of Historic Places. One of them is Velma Kroom's house.
My home was built in 1869. It was purchased by the Kroom family in the 1870s when Major Stevens Kroom came to practice law in Mobile. We are in the 5th generation of the same family in the same home. As you go through the South, you are going to get the feel that we are different, and we are proud of our heritage, we are proud of who we are, and we have a great deal to be proud of.
One of Mobile's proudest traditions is Mardi Gras. And as just about everyone in town will tell you, Mobile is the birthplace of Mardi Gras.
And they may not tell you this in the Crescent City, but here in the Port City, we will assure you that Mardi Gras was founded here in 1703. The concept was not taken by us to New Orleans until 1847.
Gordon Tatum is with the Museum of Mobile.
In Mobile, we are more of a family-type situation. We take our youngsters from a very early age, and families participate in Mardi Gras.
During Mobile's carnival season, a Mardi Gras king and queen are chosen. The queen dons an elaborate hand-woven gown.
These young ladies are representatives of Mobile's oldest and finest families. A daddy has to have deep pockets. It's an expensive thing to make your debut and to be the queen of the Mardi Gras or to be a member of the court. If you are queen this year, then the queen next year is going to outdo you. She's going to have a more elaborate gown, her train, etc. But she must cover her ankles. Her neckline may be very, very low, but she must cover her ankles. And I say that surely a gentleman made that rule. Mardi Gras is a fun time. It is a party which we have been doing for 300 years, so we think, by golly, we know how to throw a good party after all this time.
Mobile is the azalea city with more than 50 varieties blooming each spring. A few miles outside of Mobile, 250,000 azaleas can be seen at one of the South's premier gardens, Bellingrath Gardens and Home. When he purchased the land in 1917, Coca-Cola bottling pioneer Walter Bellingrath planned to make this his country getaway. His wife had something grander in mind.
This would still be a fishing camp if it wasn't for Mrs. Bellingrath and her love of flowers.
Tom McGee is Bellingrath's museum director.
The garden in their home in town in Mobile was a wonderland in the springtime, and Mrs. Bellingrath loved to buy more and more flowers, so as a result, a lot of that overflow of flowers made their way down to the fishing camp. The gardens today encompass about 68 acres within almost 1,000 acres surrounding it to protect it. The number one flower that we're known for are the azaleas, which is what Mrs. Bellingrath collected from across the Gulf Coast, from old plantation sites, from nurserymen. She had a network of people trying to find the most beautiful and unusual azalea types and varieties, as well as camellias. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of plants in all colors of the rainbow. And I think that's what makes it special. Mr. Bellingrath used to say that the gardens that he and his wife created were like a beautiful lady with 52 different gowns, one for every week of the year, that it's that kind of a change consistently throughout the year.
Back on board, the train continues east, traversing the length of Florida's Panhandle, then turning north to our next destination, Savannah, Georgia. The trip to Savannah is the longest stretch on board the train during the journey. As evening approaches, passengers catch their last glimpse of the Gulf Coast. The kitchen staff busily prepares dinner. No easy task with the kitchen bouncing down the rails at better than 60 miles an hour. Elegant dining is a railroad tradition. The planning and execution of tonight's dinner by Chef Anthony Hubbard maintains that railroading experience.
Enjoy your dinner. Thank you. When the passengers come into my dining room, I have a few different goals for them as a group. For one, I like to challenge them and offer them possibly some new foods that they haven't had before. They're eating my food 3 times a day, 6 days a week, so I try to do a range of rich food, light food, and then I just try to make their experiences, as fun as possible. There's many things on the train that we cannot change for the passengers, such as the limited size of their berthing, the movement of the train. Sometimes we have late arrivals and departures. All of these things work against the passenger's experience, and the food is the one thing that we can keep consistent and keep them, coming back for more.
Here is your prawn etouffee, dirty rice, and your filet tenderloin with butter beans and copper pennies.
The menu's based on a few different things. First of all, it's based on regional cuisine. Right now we're going from New Orleans to Washington, D.C., so you'll get a lot of southern flair throughout the menu. Things like okra and catfish, things that you wouldn't normally get if you're somewhere other than the South. I also incorporate classic train food. For example, tonight, a few of the classic train dishes that I will be serving is, for one, the salad, which is a tarragon marinated tomato salad with a sherry vinaigrette, and that was from the Harvey Houses, which are a famous line of train restaurants. I'm also serving a grilled chicken breast with a sweet corn relish. That is also the classic train fare.
How are we this evening, ladies?
I like to go out into the dining room every night after service to introduce myself to some of the passengers, get a little feedback possibly. I enjoy this because they enjoy this. It helps them feel more a part of the train as a whole. It also is the best way for me to see how things are going. What makes my day is when I walk up to a passenger to ask how they're doing. Sir, how was your meals this evening? Very good. Excellent. Their mouth is stuffed with food. There's crumbs all over the place. When they finally manage to stop eating for a second, they say, oh, the food was wonderful. So a genuine smile is the best compliment I can hope to receive.
The long evening on board allows passengers to get to know each other.
La la, do re mi fa sol la, la la la.
It is also a perfect time to relax with a good book. On this journey, the book of choice is Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. The true story of a Savannah murder. Midnight also provides an excellent introduction to this southern city.
I was really enchanted with it. I thought the whole movie and the whole story was very interesting. I thought the actual the scenery in the movie and just the way the movie was taken and everything about it was very enchanting.
It makes us want to see Savannah more because of the movie. So we've seen parts of it, now we want to see all of it.
Savannah is relatively small. Only about 140,000 people live here. Isolated by forests and tidal flatlands, it is a city steeped in southern traditions and culture. Yet it was the publication of the book, as it is known here, that transformed Savannah into a tourist mecca.
I have a book,
Okay.
and I have a big favor to ask you. I'd like you to put it to all of our names. on
All
the
right.
book. Okay.
Four.
Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil has brought thousands of people to Savannah and turned author John Barrett into a Savannah icon.
We came to Savannah because we all read your book.
Really?
Yeah.
I first came to Savannah in 1982 on a whim. I'd heard about the city. I hadn't seen any pictures of it. I just heard it was very nice. But when I arrived here, I was completely overwhelmed by the beauty of the place. It's a magically beautiful, seductively beautiful city. And I thought that Savannah would be a good subject for a book. It took me 7 years to do it, and I enjoyed it. I moved down here for 5 years while I was researching and writing the book, and I come back off.
Savannah has a remarkable tradition of historic preservation. More than 2,000 restored and preserved buildings and homes make up its famed historic district, a 2.5 square mile area that forms the heart of downtown Savannah.
I would say probably the unique element of Savannah is its squares. And those date from the very first day of the colony of Georgia. So that every other intersection now, today, you have a square. They're all beautiful. And they're all different sizes as well. They are absolutely beautiful mini parks.
It was in Savannah's Chippewa Square where actor Tom Hanks waited for his bus in the movie Forrest Gump. But Monterey Square is by far Savannah's most notorious. For it is here that you'll find the Mercer House. In 1981, a scandalous murder occurred in this pre-Civil War mansion. The crime would shock the city and become the centerpiece of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which has become the unofficial guidebook of Savannah.
The thing about Midnight and Savannah is that you can tell in the book how absolutely beautiful the city is. It was one of the things that I was very careful to transmit as well as I could, and that was the absolute beauty of the city. So that comes through, and it doesn't surprise me that somebody reading the book would want to go and see Savannah. And of course, I'm delighted for Savannah's sake.
The success of the book has turned Bonaventure Cemetery into one of Savannah's most visited places. The compelling photograph for the book's cover was taken here by Savannah photographer Jack Leigh.
I had been photographing for a couple of nights, and it was the end of the second evening, and the light was about to fade away, and I had wandered off into this part of the cemetery. Lo and behold, came over here and looked into the shadows. I'd seen all the statues I thought in the cemetery over all these years, and was astonished on the last moments of the last evening to discover this little statue. And I think she chose her moment to reveal herself to me.
The cover photograph created enormous interest in the Bird Girl statue. It became such a tourist attraction that for its own safety, it was moved out of the cemetery. The Bird Girl statue is now on exhibit at Savannah's Telfair Museum of Art. It is not an accident that one of Jack Leigh's photographs from this cemetery became a symbol of all that is Savannah.
Bonaventure Cemetery is a place that I've been coming all my life, and when you look around here and see that it is truly a layer upon layer of Georgia history. The cemetery really hasn't changed since the 18th century. And I think this is what people have really discovered. I mean, we've had the doorway flung open by midnight, but it's flung open all these hidden treasures. There's the Johnny Mercer gravesite, and of course, Johnny Mercer is the voice of Savannah in terms of his wonderful songs that he wrote. And when people visit the Conrad-Aiken bench, they are paying tribute to one of Savannah's greatest poets and writers. Bonaventure Cemetery has probably got one of the most incredible displays of live oak trees, which have been one of my favorite subject matters over the years. I think the live oaks truly are our monumental architecture of the Georgia coast. They are just magnificent beings. They all have personalities, they're all draped in Spanish moss, and they are living history.
Bonaventure Cemetery is but one place where Jack Leigh captures images of the South.
My photographs have been about the folks who make a living from the water, the oystermen, the shrimpers of this incredible coastline, as well as the folks who make a living from the land, the cotton farmers, the peanut farmers. I'm from the South. So these are all traditions that I've grown up around. And over the years, I have spent my time photographing the elements of the southeastern landscape that I think is unique about us and what gives us our character and soul.
Another early morning departure gets us underway for the relatively short trip north from Savannah to Charleston. Stands of Joshua and palmetto trees line the route. Countless rivers and streams converge, paralleling the train's course towards the tidal lands of coastal South Carolina. The passing South Carolina scene creates a relaxing setting for passengers to enjoy a hearty southern breakfast.
Here you go, sir.
Oh, that looks good. This must be cheese and grits.
I'm glad to see you eating grits. And South Carolina has always been known for their grits for breakfast, particularly.
In South Carolina, it wouldn't make any difference what you ordered. You would get grits with it regardless.
is our second trip on the train, and we're from San Diego. And we enjoyed our first trip so much that we look forward to this one.
There are many, many people in our generation for which it's perfect. You don't have to struggle in and out of airports and that sort of thing. Your luggage is there. And if you remember that you pack lightly.
The countryside is just so glorious. And it's not from a highway, but you're right in the middle of it.
Charleston, South Carolina is one of the nation's most architecturally significant cities. Despite hurricanes, fire, and war, it has preserved a rich cultural heritage. So many historic structures have been restored that its skyline looks more 18th century than 21st century. The first shots of the Civil War were fired at Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. Boat tours offer a glimpse of the island's defenses and wonderful views of Charleston's colorful waterfront. One of the most popular ways to see the architectural diversity of Charleston is on a carriage ride.
Look along the back, folks. You see the glass roof in the
Tom
back?
Doyle moved here from the north in 1966. He has been giving carriage tours of Charleston for over 20 years, with a little help from his mules and horses.
Where are you ladies from? All right, welcome to Charleston.
You can take carriage tours in a lot of places, but I don't think there's any place that has the carriage business that Charleston has. The narrow streets and the closeness of it all lends itself to the carriage experience. Also, too, the history that Charleston has, over 2,000 buildings that date from the 1800s and earlier in a very confined area, lend itself to a building after building after building after building kind of narrative. And that's really what you need to flesh out a good tour.
Right, gang, this row of buildings we're going to pass next is Rainbow Row. Rainbow Row is pre-revolutionary. There are a few places in the Western Hemisphere where you'll find this many buildings in a row over 200 years old, 13 buildings.
I think that tourists, for the most part, are pretty surprised that this is really a living city, that it doesn't exist as a museum, but rather as a residential area. And you have these beautiful 18th and 19th century mansions that still function as 20th century homes. I came down here in 1966 as a freshman at the Citadel. To me, the Civil War was something I read about in books. The South was another part of the country, and I was shocked when I got down here. To me, the only thing a Yankee was is somebody who played baseball for a New York team. But there is a very strong regionalism down here, a very strong sense of history.
During the Civil War, that was the tallest building in Charleston, hit by Union cannon fire 10 times. Coming up on the left of the carriage now is the Dock Street Theater. When the Dock Street Theater opened in 1736, it was America's first theater of the performing arts. The first playhouse in North America stood on this site. On the right is the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, and it took 19 years to build what you're looking at, 1888 to 1907. The trees that line State Street here are palmetto trees, our state symbol. It is the hardiest of all of the palm trees, but even so, this is the very northern edge of its growing limit. And you'll only find it thriving like this along the coast. And you'll see it today on our state flag.
I see my carriage as a stage, and I see my passengers as my audience. I roll through the city, and the scenery is constantly changing around me. My supporting cast, the people of the city, they're always different. And I may be doing a tour for the 5,000th time, but everybody on my tour is taking it for the first time. And I try to carry that first-time enthusiasm through my tour. When someone leaves here, they should feel almost like they're part of Charleston, and they're going to take part of it back with them.
On the outskirts of the city lies the Ashley River area. Towering moss-draped oaks have shaded this river for centuries. Before the Civil War, many of South Carolina's most prominent families built plantations along the Ashley's banks. In 1865, Union troops destroyed most of the plantation houses. Drayton Hall was spared, and the reason why remains a mystery. Drayton Hall is considered one of the most architecturally significant dwellings in America. It has been left completely unfurnished to highlight the original plaster moldings, hand-carved woodwork, and other ornamental details. Drayton Hall's expansive grounds provide the perfect backdrop for a favorite low-country tradition, a good old-fashioned barbecue and oyster roast.
When you cook a piece of meat and the bone falls out like that, you know you cooked it right. Ham and carrots and wax beans and fresh green beans, smoked neck bone Vidalia onions, and you're good to go. And KGB, the killer green bean.
As with any South Carolina low-country get-together, there's plenty of food. But the real draw here is the oysters. Drayton Hall director, Dr. George McDaniel.
This is what used to be done on the plantations years ago. They'd have these outdoor occasions like this. Family and friends would come by. Oysters were plentiful, a lot more plentiful then than they are now. They would gather them up locally, bring them back. They wanted to leave them in the shell and roast them in the shell because that preserves the flavor. It's that wonderful salt water that's in here that's retained, and then when that's steamed, that modestly cooks the oyster, but doesn't cook it too much, or otherwise you lose your flavor.
The bigger ones are a little bit better than these little teeny ones, but you gotta take them all.
Oh, look at this one, Ann. You'd think we had nothing to eat all day.
You just see that the steam pops them open, as you can see here. So you take this oyster knife and then come in like so, and then open it up. And then you come in and then cut the muscle underneath it like that. And then you put them in a little sauce, and they're delicious.
Just upriver from Drayton Hall is the site of another former plantation, Middleton Place. Once the home of Arthur Middleton, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, the original mansion was burned to the ground in the waning days of the Civil War. Only a flanker house was salvaged. Today, it is open to the public as a house museum. But there's much more to Middleton Place. Museum Administrator Tracy Todd.
When a visitor comes to Middleton Place, they have access to about 110 acres of a National Historic Landmark. About 65 acres of that include a formal garden. That formal garden has many of the same aspects or same characteristics of gardens from England, such as the octagonal garden, the use of geometric shapes, the use of ponds for reflecting light and for reflecting the garden architecture.
Low-country wildlife abounds on the grounds and in the ponds here. But watch your step, for the animals have the right of way. The beauty of Middleton Place could lull some to forget that it was enslaved human beings that made plantation life possible.
We don't try to hide the fact that these gardens were developed by slave labor, and most of the buildings here that exist were built by slave labor. You'll hear interpretation of the lives of enslaved Africans and the types of jobs that they did on various plantations, including Middleton Place. Today, you'll see a working craftsman, a carpenter, a cooper, potters, working as they would have on plantations in the 18th and 19th centuries. Middleton Place has a lot to offer visitors. If they're interested in history, they should definitely put the Ashley River on their itinerary because of the plantations that have been preserved here.
Morning, Mr. Moore. This is your morning wake-up call.
Our journey continues early the next morning. Porter T.J. Jakubic has begun his wake-up calls.
Porter, good morning. Got your coffee this morning.
I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I would never have guessed that I would be doing this in a million years. I've always wanted to travel, so I've been looking for something, but this was out of the blue, and it's been a great experience for me so far. I've enjoyed every bit of it. I basically take care of the passengers' needs while they're in their sleeping cars. In the mornings, I do wake-up calls, shower times, and room service. At night, I also do pulling down the beds, getting ready for them to go to bed, putting out the daily itinerary for the next day so that they know what's going on. This is their vacation. If they're not comfortable, they're not going to enjoy their trip. So my job is to make them comfortable in any way that I can.
Where are we now, Thomas?
We're in Florence, South Carolina. I love the job. You really do get a chance to know the people a little bit better than you would in a hotel environment. And normally, if you give them a smile, they're happy.
Our journey continues through rural South Carolina into North Carolina on our way to Richmond, Virginia. The passing Carolina countryside is a patchwork of cotton, tobacco, and soybean fields. Our route takes us along the original main streets of many small southern towns. Towns like Dillon, South Carolina, and Fayetteville, North Carolina. The track's proximity to Main Street is not a coincidence. In times past, the railroad was the primary link to the rest of the country, both socially and economically. Although Fayetteville is no longer dependent on the rails for its survival, the 88-year-old train station is still in use today as a stop on Amtrak's Silver Meteor and Silver Palm lines. This is the longest daylight stretch on board, giving passengers a chance to enjoy the views and the train. Brad Lamazzi is a railroad artifacts historian. He's on board to share tales of railroading's past and his extensive collection of railroad travel brochures.
Well, since most passengers were on the train for adventure, by having a travel guide to learn about the towns that they were going through, they were able to get more of what they wanted out of their journey. They provided information about climate, agriculture, interesting industry, hunting and fishing, all the things that people were interested in. They were also produced in fictionalized narrative forms where they would have characters portray journeys across the country and their experiences when they found different adventures along the way. So they're very fascinating to read.
Oh, and we have the dome card.
Every time you read them, you go back into the past. And you can look at them lots of times and get more out of them each time.
Crossing the James River signals our approach into Richmond, Virginia. The train comes to rest at the historic Broad Street station. Passenger trains haven't stopped here since a new station was built in 1975.
This is one of the last great monumental train stations built in the United States before the Depression.
Dr. Walter Witchey is the director of the Science Museum of Virginia.
The design is marvelous. This was created by John Russell Pope, who as a young architect out of school spent 3 years overseas studying Greek and Roman architecture. When he came to Richmond, he designed what he'd been studying, a grand piece of neoclassical revival design here that the architects tell me incorporates the best of the old world, that is the stone forms of 2,000 years ago, with materials and new designs from the early part of the 20th century.
At its peak in the 1930s, the station served thousands of passengers per day. But with the decline of train travel, the station fell into disuse, and in 1975 faced demolition. The people of Richmond demanded it be saved, and so, where once anxious passengers queued to travel by train, now curious visitors can pilot a simulated plane. Today, the Broad Street station is home to the Science Museum of Virginia.
What we have created is a place filled with marvelous hands-on activities, more than 250 of them, so that if you come here today with 4 generations of people, I guarantee you all will have a wonderful time. It's clear that without a new use and new vigor, such as the Science Museum brings, there would be no money to preserve a building like this, and it would be gone. So I'm delighted that as we transform it, we end up with a building that is filled each day, and it's that use and activity that are preserving it today.
Richmond, Virginia played a crucial role in American and Southern history. During the Revolutionary War, it was the capital of the provisional government. During the Civil War, the capital of the Confederacy. Its Confederate past is remembered citywide with statues, monuments, and through the preservation of places like Hollywood Cemetery, the final resting place of 18,000 Confederate soldiers. But no place immerses a visitor in the images of the war between the states, like the Museum of the Confederacy.
I think there is an intense feeling for being Southern, even this far north in the Confederacy. And a gum blanket.
Richard Cheatham is an educator at the museum.
If you see an officer dressed as I am, they'll probably have a frock coat on. It's a longer coat. And
he helps explain and interpret the museum's exhibits by becoming a person from the South's past.
Right now, I know where the Army is. I just left. They're up there west of Fredericksburg. But when I'm ready to come back from a furlough, there's no telling whether they'll be there or not. They don't wait on me.
The museum's halls display the largest collection of Confederate artifacts in the world. Controversial symbols of a time of war, a divided nation, and of the Confederacy's defense of slavery.
To walk through the galleries of this museum, you're given an almost eerie feeling sometimes when you look at the things that surround you. It's awe-inspiring to see the actual battle flags that were carried in the field with the bullet holes in them and uniforms with bloodstains on them. The items that surround you are so filled with important memories. So this museum is an important stop for anybody who wants to see more and learn more about Richmond's part in the war between the states.
Richmond is best known for its Civil War attractions, but its important role in revolutionary America is also celebrated. St. John's Church is the oldest church in Richmond, offering services for over 250 years. But a speech made here in 1775 by Patriot Patrick Henry also made it the site of a paramount moment in American history, and visitors can relive it every Sunday in the summer.
Is life so dear, or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty, or give me death.
Virginia's state capital is a place where both the state's Revolutionary and Confederate past are remembered. This magnificent structure was designed by Thomas Jefferson and continues to serve as Virginia's seat of government.
When the war started, Leigh was stationed down in Texas.
The halls are filled with statuary, including a striking bronze of General Robert E. Lee. The statue stands on the spot where Lee, having been offered control of the armies of both the North and South, accepted the command of the Confederate forces. 8 U.S. presidents were Virginian-born, and all are honored in the Capitol's rotunda. Here, too, stands Virginia's most treasured work of art, and perhaps the most priceless marble statue in the United States, a life-size statue of George Washington. Carved in 1788, it is said to be a perfect likeness of the then 53-year-old Washington.
It is exactly the way he looked when he was 53 years old. He was 6 feet 2 1/2. He weighed about
Our final day begins in the early morning with the short 109-mile jaunt north to Washington, D.C. It's the last chance to sit back and enjoy the passing southern scenes. The rolling wooded hills of rural Virginia are gradually replaced by a more urban landscape. As the train nears Washington, D.C., there's time for a little last-minute packing.
Good morning. Good morning. Luggage for D.C.
The George Washington National Masonic Memorial dominates the skyline as we roll through Alexandria, Virginia. The train slows as it crosses the Potomac River. We arrive, as thousands have over the past century, passing through the gateway of our nation's capital, Washington's Union Station. Construction began in 1903, the same year the Wright brothers successfully flew their airplane, marking the beginning of the end of the golden age of rail travel. In 1988, thanks to a 2-year, $50 million restoration project, Union Station is again a transportation palace. Today, visitors can browse the many shops, take in a movie, enjoy a meal, or take a train. But for the passengers of our train, arriving at Union Station marks the end of their southern sojourn.
All righty.
Thank you very much. Sir, we loved it.
Good, good. Thank you very much.